I'm joined by 4 members of the European Parliament, all of whom are in countries that are not in the Eurozone, for better or for worse. I'm joined by Nigel Farage, who is leader of the UK Independence Party, also the co-president of the Freedom and Democracy Group here at the Parliament. Göran Färm, you are a Swedish social democrat. You speak for the Socialist Group as well on budgetary and economic matters. We have Sir Graham Watson, who is a British Liberal Democrat, formerly the leader of the Liberal Group here in the Parliament, and Vice President of the European People's Party, that's the centre-right grouping, and also a Romanian centre-right MEP. We have Marian Jean Marinescu. So thanks all of you for joining me. Nigel Farage, it's true, isn't it, that whatever way you look at it from wherever you're coming, this crisis, not just its immediate impact, but what comes next, poses very real challenges for those countries that aren't in the euro.
Yeah, it does. I mean, this huge debate in Britain about should there be a referendum a couple of weeks ago, and we were told with the government now was not the right time. But actually, what appears to be happening is the 17 Eurozone countries are moving quite rapidly towards centralised decision-making. They have a majority. So single market legislation, things that will affect Britain, but will leave Britain in a minority outside the Eurozone. So very clearly, there are 10 countries now saying to themselves, well, there appear to be now very clearly 2 divisions within the European Union.
Do you accept, though, presumably you do care about what happens to British business and British interests, do you accept that Britain needs to keep its influence?
No.
Why?
Actually, if you talk about British business, let's talk about the globe. Let's not talk about the European marketplace.
But we're in the European Union, so within the European Union...
We're in the European Union, but we're also part of the world. And the European Union is a rapidly declining business place for us, and actually the crisis is making that even more relevant, that what we need to do is to have influence, not in Brussels, but in terms of global trade.
I hope every business in your constituency hopes you say this, because at least 1 in 10 jobs in the United Kingdom depends on our membership of the European Union. Absolutely do. We have a huge investment here. We have 50% of our trade with European Union countries.
Okay.
Not a single British job depends on EU membership.
Let's hear from our non-British members.
Pretend to be patriotic. The patriotic line in the United Kingdom is to make the European Union work.
Göran, do you get this kind of debate in Sweden?
I think it's a bit more realistic, a little bit, well, not quite so high-key, rather more low-key, more serious. But of course there's a debate, but not actually about leaving the Union. On the contrary, we had an opinion poll just lately saying that the polls in favour of staying in the Union in Sweden is 55 to 20, with some 35 don't know. I mean, it's the biggest majority in favour of the EU membership we've ever had. It's another thing about the euro.
The single currency, right down. You'd accept that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, but I mean, this also shifts very rapidly. We've had majorities in favour of the euro. Now there's clearly a majority against, but I'm quite convinced, and that's what we'll see about the future. If the Eurozone can handle the crisis, can create a new situation with more of stability, etc., then I'm quite convinced that this will be an issue again in Sweden.
And do you think it will? Do you think it will recover, the Eurozone?
Absolutely, because I mean, for several reasons. First of all, the alternative is much worse. And secondly, I mean, we've already started. We have a lot of new rules in place. We have the so-called six-pack. We have the supervisory institutions on the financial sector. We have the bailout fund, etc. I mean, we have done a lot of things to deal with the problems.
Italian bonds broke through 7% this morning at midday.
Yeah, but they would have done that even if they weren't part of the euro. That's the point.
Romania, let's go to another country.
Doesn't matter the euro or not euro. The area, the Europe, will recover, because anyway the countries, the member states, they need to take measures in order to come back to the health of the financial system.
Well, they've been saying they need to take measures for the last 6 months. But your country, Romania, the plan was to join the euro by 2015. Now, that's not going to happen, is it?
No, we are keeping the target, and we are making... Yes, we are keeping the target for the moment, and we are making a lot of efforts to reach this target.
Is that really honest? I mean, how can you possibly think you would join in 2015?
No, it was a discussion, but, you know, joining the Eurozone, it's based on technical things. So the analysis is very easy to be done. So it was a discussion if we postpone or not because of all these financial problems. But at the end, we decided that we can try. So we shall go on this way and we shall try to reach this target.
Let's talk back about this issue of the sort of way in which the Eurozone and those in it are, not all of them, but some of them are pushing for this sort of greater identity. And when they talk about the European Union, what they're really meaning is the Eurozone. And does that worry you, Graham?
It doesn't worry me. There is a tension. There have been tensions all through the history of the European Union about which countries participate in which bits of European cooperation. Some participate in the Schengen border control system, some do not. Some participate partially. Some participate in the euro, some do not. Some of those outside it do not wish to join, and some of those outside do wish to join. But what is clear is that the European Union is stronger with 27 members and with over 500 million citizens in a difficult world where you're up against China with 1.3 billion, India with nearly 1 billion, and so on. The European Union is stronger if all 27 countries stay together, and I think they will.
You may think that, but not everyone agrees. I mean, Carl Bildt said he was worried about the dangers of a two-speed Europe. Do you share that concern?
Yes, I do, because I don't think it wouldn't be the right future for Europe. I think we need to stick together as much as we can, but of course there are things that the Euro countries have to solve on their own, things which are related to the Euro, to the central bank, to some of the economic policies. But of course, if this would have an effect also on other decisions, I mean like the internal market or other kinds of legislation, then it's a real problem. I think the problem is not just the Eurozone against the rest, it's also about the dominant position of Germany and France. We've seen a lot of bilateral talks between Germany and France preceding the EU ministerial meetings and the Eurozone meetings. That's not very good. And that upsets not just countries like Sweden, but also particularly Eastern Europe. I mean, the Polish presidency has been very critical against those things. That's
well,
danger.
If the Eurozone gains in its ascendancy in sort of dominating European Union policy, so does France and Germany, presumably.
Well, they've been ruling the roost for the last couple of weeks, and in fact, they've helped to bring down two governments. You know, they've demanded Papandreou's head, they've effectively demanded Berlusconi's head, and I think the small member states, particularly within the Eurozone, must be very worried for the behaviour they've seen over the last few weeks. But really, this whole debate, you know, the aspiration of the Eurozone and the aspiration of the Commission and the Council is to use this crisis as an opportunity to push on, not towards a multi-speed Europe that Graham described, but towards having one treasury. You know, that's what they're talking about, and this is actually rather different to anything that we've seen before in the European Union. But I think what we're forgetting around this table is the scale of this crisis. This crisis is now bigger than the governments and the European institutions, and I suspect that when we sit round this table in a year's time, we will not have the same member states within the Eurozone.
Perhaps one could argue that the Romanian president, your president, who said recently, we need a United States of Europe, we need a VAT set by Brussels, it's the only way we're going to deal with this issue of globalization. Perhaps he was the one being honest around the table.
No,
do you agree with him?
He declared this several times, even in a meeting in Bucharest in September. But I think that we all here, we are here in the Parliament, we are working on the European legislation. What does it mean, this? More integration, yeah? More Europe, more coordination, which at the end will end with United States of Europe, in my opinion, because everything is based on legislation.
And that's a good thing in your view. I mean, in Britain, it's not seen as good.
I'm sorry, that is not desirable. Before this programme,
it is not desirable by all the people, but at the end, the majority will have to.
You asked me before this programme what
the minority will have to join the majority.
Okay, let Nigel briefly and then Joran.
The very fact that you, as an advocate of us becoming part of a single state, did not even know what that stood for, says to me, we're not ready yet, but maybe not for 1,000 years.
Okay.
Why should somebody in Romania know
what?
Why should we go to a single state?
I ask you about the sign, what is the symbol for? And I don't think that
no, that's fair enough. Joran,
I can
it may be fundamental in your neighbourhood.
Joran, in Romania, I am sure that you will not.
Nigel.
We trade with you, be friendly with you. We don't want to be in the same country as you. It's as simple as that.
This will not be a country. This will be Europe.
The United States is not a country?
No, it's Europe.
Let's hear from Göran.
For once...
And I don't think that Graham is on the same side with
Jean-Marie,
you.
let's hear from Göran.
I, for once, agree with Nigel Farage. I don't want a United States of Europe.
Good.
But I want a Europe which, in particular areas, have a legislation power, have powers to integrate in the economy, in border-crossing legislation on environmental issues, in a more common European foreign security policy, etc. I think that's absolutely necessary if Europe shall be able to play a role in the world. But it doesn't mean one country. It doesn't mean that all the legislation should be the same. It doesn't mean the United States of Europe. This is something new. It's a federation in particular areas, but not in all.
Does it mean putting a brake on a tendency? I mean, even in your own group here at the European Parliament, we heard one of the French members, Pervenche Perez, came up with a suggestion that when it came to economic matters, non-Eurozone MEPs, British and Swedish presumably as well, should be left out of that decision-making. Yeah. There is a move towards that, isn't there?
I'm quite convinced that will never happen. I mean, that
For
would
sure.
be
And
stupid.
where Nigel Farage and his United Kingdom Independence Party are deeply unpatriotic is that our soldiers fought and died in 2 world wars for peace and democracy in Europe. For peace and democracy in Europe. And what the European Union has done has consolidated peace and democracy on our continent. And it continues to do. It certainly has not killed democracy. And it's not France and Germany who've changed the government. It's the Greek people and the Italian people who have told their governments to go because their governments were unable to deal with the crisis. We're all in this together. The United Kingdom is in it. Our government is having to deal with the financial mess left by the Labour Party. We have a debt which is in GDP terms the same as Greece's. We're dealing with it rather better than the Greeks have.
Euro, wouldn't you?
Which is what... No, we're dealing with it rather better than the Greeks are dealing with it. I believe if we joined the euro 10 years ago, actually things might have turned out differently, yes. Because I think we would have had a very, very impact. I do, because I think the United Kingdom's input would have had a very different impact on the rules. Just as if we'd been in the common agricultural policy at the beginning, it wouldn't have turned out as this. What we're trying to do is to keep our economies on track and to make Europe work to secure peace and democracy. And actually, it's not working badly, Nigel.
10-year rate
Very briefly, Nigel, and then back to Jean-Marie.
In Italy, they're 7%. If we join the euro, ours would be 7%, wouldn't they?
It would change the equation completely.
Because a lot of people are saying that it's not so much the non-Eurozone or the Eurozone divisions that are emerging here, but it's also those countries that are better off, that are more disciplined, and those who aren't.
But it's very easy to say that it's about discipline. I mean, it's about history. And look at Greece. They fought a civil war. They had a military dictatorship during the 50s and 60s. I mean, it's about history. What they are trying, and I mean, every political power in Greece has to share the responsibility for the situation. But I mean, their problems cannot be solved by leaving the Eurozone. What's their problems? It's a non-working tax system. Can they solve that by leaving the Eurozone? No. It's an ineffective public sector. It's corruption. Can they deal with that by a currency policy? No, they cannot. And the same thing goes with Italy.
Graham, the response of the British government has in part to this worry about being sidelined in a two-speed Europe, has in part been to promise to renegotiate parts of the treaty if the treaty is revisited. Do you think that is balderdash, or do you actually think that is a sensible response?
Well, the British government has said that it wants to renegotiate the treaty if there is a change to the treaties. But where I think it's highly unlikely to be the case.
Take advantage of any possibility.
Well, that's right. But where it's
exactly
highly unlikely to be the case is it's highly unlikely the treaties will actually need to be revisited. Nobody wants to change the treaties unless it's absolutely necessary. A lot can be done within the existing. What Göran Färm was talking about earlier, all of the things that we've done over the last 2 years have been done within the existing treaties. There is probably no need to change the treaties.
A lot of people would like to change the treaties back in Britain to give more powers back to the British Parliament, actually.
Well, I don't believe that the British Parliament has been stripped of its powers. The British Parliament still rules on the whole of our national life. And nothing happens at European level unless it's been agreed by the British government and by British members of the European Parliament.
In a minority position. in a minority position, and 8% of the votes.
Position. Nobody is here in majority.
Well, of course, it isn't just Britain that surrendered her democracy. All the nations of Europe have to. Look, this whole renegotiation argument, this is becoming the new buzzword for those that want to keep us inside the European Union. Promise to renegotiate, and therefore will buy off the increasingly Eurosceptic opinion in this country. There is not going to be any substantial renegotiation of powers back to Britain. It's not even on the agenda. The choice we face is, do we want to be members of political union, or do we want a completely separate free trade agreement? That's the reality.
OK, well, maybe you'll agree to some extent with each other on that one. For that, though, on that, let's leave.